are. This is the project that you heard in the intro. It's just 107 BPM, which is an important thing to note because this style of music, at least this kind of beat, I noticed Kaytranada and others are typically doing like house beats, but a lot slower. So like house music would be like 125, but obviously that's a little too fast. So I did 107. Usually anything between like 100 and like 115 is pretty solid for this kind of stuff. Now as far as the sort of layers we got going on, we have this sample. I'll start with that, which just sounds like this. It's just sort of like a warm analog sounding sample. And the way that I got this is I'm going to take all this processing off real quick. But the way that I got this was I took this sample from like an old 80s sort of like funk, like sort of like easy listening smooth jazz type track, which you can find here. And this project file, as well as all the samples and stuff, are available in the description. You can just download them for free. And I have the MIDI for the bass line as well. But that just started out its life, I guess, as this. So like I said, just sort of like a super smooth jazz type of thing. And I took that into Ableton, and I warped it. So it was about this fast, like as fast as our thing. And you can see all these hits line up with the original tempo that we're working with. And then I took that up to +5 semitones, just to give it a more sampled feel. So it was a little smoother as well, because when you speed things up, you kind of need to pitch them up, or else the transients start to get kind of weird, and it just starts to sound kind of odd. So after that, I just added this EQ8, which I'm just using as like a low-pass filter. You can hear that's kind of like where a lot of the stuff is happening, because it's taking out that high end and making it sound more like vapor wavy, I guess. And then I just added these 2 a bit warmers to sort of fatten things up and make it a bit warmer, so to speak. But that was a little bit harsh, so I added this phaser to make it a bit smoother and almost like more kind of analog sounding. Like this sounds a lot more sort of old school to me, and also just sort of more like warm, and that's what I was going for with this sample. And I think that's sort of the key here, is to make your sounds, even if you're doing it like in the computer, to try and make them sound like warm and analog. So after that I just added this erosion, which you can hear is doing a pretty subtle thing. It's just adding a little bit of that like top end crunch that sounds like bit crushing, which is similar to like an old sampler. That's what they tend to do because they only sample at like a certain bit rate. So I just did that to emulate that. And then I have it sidechained to the kick. So that's pretty straightforward. And I just have a little EQ on here doing like a high pass to cut out some of that low end because it was clashing with the bass. Now as far as the bass line, it's just MIDI. I was going for like a live bass sound, but it's just a it's just operator actually, funny enough. It's not even like a super nice bass sound, or like a bass VST or something. It's just this. It's this guitar bass. If you have Ableton Suite, if you look up guitar in here, it should come up under bass. It's just one of these operator presets. And it sounds pretty realistic, honestly, like in the lower registers. But then once you start getting up high, you can kind of tell it's FM synthesis. So as far as the notes going on here, I just played this sample it was originally in F minor, and so moving it up 5, it's in A sharp minor. So I just played some notes in that key, which actually started with C sharp because it felt a little bit better to me. And I liked where it was on the range, like it sounded nice at this low of a range, whereas A sharp as the main note wasn't quite right. And so the key here is these like sort of jumpy 16th notes. Like you see I have it go up an octave there and there and there and there. And I just sort of drew in like this busy bass line while listening to the kick and the sample, but not too busy. Like the key here is you want it to sound like it's a lot going on and a lot of notes, but there's a perfect balance between not enough and too much, and you just have to figure out how to get that. So that's what I did. And if you see, these notes aren't swung in here. I didn't draw those in. I just drew them in as straight 16 notes, and then I used this logic swing, which if you go in your Ableton packs and go to your core library, the logic swings are under here, and these 16th note swings are really good, and they just go up as they are more intense. Like if you hear this, it's a lot less intense of a swing than this. So I just used, I think it's like Logic Swing 69 or whatever. And yeah, so as far as the processing, like I said, I started with an operator preset that I didn't touch for the bass. And then I put this a bit warmer on, just to make it a bit warmer, funny enough. And then I took this EQ8 and made like a peak filter. Because I wanted to bring out this frequency. There's this one Daft Punk song that I heard, I believe it's Voyager, where they have like this live bass sound. It's a live bass, but it sounds kind of synthy, and it's because they did a similar technique to what I did here. So I just wanted to do that because I was trying to invoke that, and it sounded pretty good to me. And then after that, I just sidechained it to the kick. So next, I guess we can talk about the drums. So that's the full like drum groove or whatever. As far as the kick, I just used the sample. I think it's from the Ramzoid Splice Pack or something. I'm not sure, but it's for you can just sort of look it up, I guess. And what I did was I drew in, so it's just doom 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 like quarter notes, but then I moved every 2 and every 4 forward a little bit to like that. And what that does is it sort of gives it more of like a human feel. I've talked about this in my videos before. It's a good way to really give your beats sort of like a more realistic feel and more of an interesting groove, because if I just put them on like every 2, it kind of sounds a little weird. I much prefer to have it be like sort of off like that. And not much that. I didn't really touch the processing on the kick. I just made sure to get the levels right and make sure it sounds good with the bass. And that's another thing, is like your kick and bass relationship is really important here with this kind of music. Anything where you have a lot of groove, it's very important. So it was just important to sort of make sure they sound good together. And in this case, they do. As far as the clap, I did a little bit of a technique that I would like to talk about. So what it is it's 2 clap samples. It's this one, and then this one. And then layered together, they sound like this. And now what I did was I just sort of took them, and you see I sort of staggered them. But I didn't put either of them like perfectly on the beat, but they're sort of like they go but very quickly. And what that is meant to do is to simulate like what a live clap would be like. Like if you had like 2 people clapping in a room, for example, and you recorded that, like it would never be perfectly on the they never hit perfectly at the same time. And especially when you get like more and more groups of people doing it, it doesn't really become, it can never really be like perfect. So I wanted to emulate that with this. And if you really want to be meticulous with it, you can go in and like move each one to different places. I didn't do that with this one just for like the purposes of this being a tutorial. But yeah, you can really get a lot of cool sort of live sounds with that. Now I did this little technique here with the saturator and with a reverb. So what you can do is get your reverb and use it to make the sound sort of like have an interesting like grainy decay as opposed to just like a reverb. I'll show you. It's very short what I did because the decay time is like that. But essentially, that's before, and that's with the saturator. And so this isn't a preset. I just drew these in with the saturator. I just set these knobs sort of like to taste, I guess. And yeah, having that sort of like crunchy little decay on there sounds pretty good to me. So I did that. And then I just added on a bit warmer to sort of make it a bit louder and a little bit more rough. And so that's pretty much that. And then after that, we just have the hi-hats. And then this other thing. I guess there's nothing on this track. I can delete it. But, yeah, we just have these hi-hats, which there's a bit of a technique there I want to show you. So these are 2 that I found in some packs. And what I did was, you can hear there's an open one and a closed one. And so I sort of drew them in like this. And you see, like I did, for every open one, there's a closed one right after. And then I have this choke here in Ableton set to 1, which means whenever you play like one of these while this is still ringing out, like if I play this one and this one's still ringing out, it'll end that. And what you can do is you can use that to your advantage to get like a more live feel, because if you think about it, like if you play a live hi-hat, you can't play it open and closed at the same time. Every time you close it, you hear that. So this is supposed to like emulate that. And it's a good way to get sort of like a live feel with a drum rack. And so these are just 2 like hi-hat samples. Let me take off the processing and I will show you what I did to them. Or I'll show you what they sound like to start with. They're actually pretty just simple. I'll just show you this one. And I also pitched them down, but just dry. That just sounds like that. And so I also added this add some random, which is just a preset that comes for the velocity in Ableton. And what that does is you can hear if I turn it off, it's kind of boring. And it just adds, as the description says, some randomness to it and changes the velocities, which changes the volume, because this comes pre-mapped for somewhere in here for the velocity to affect the volume. So that's pretty much that. As far as processing goes, I just added a little bit of reverb just to give it some space. But I messed with the dry wet and the decay time and the size. So it's very short, but it's just adding a bit of space. And like I said, I'm just trying to make it sound a little bit more live, like I was saying with the other stuff. So this just sort of brings it to life and makes it sound a little bit more like it's in a room and more like a live hi-hat. Then I added an auto filter, which you can hear is taking out the high end and boosting around here to give it a bit more warmth. And that plays into this because this brings that out even more. This saturator, which is just this mid-range fattener, which is a preset for the saturator, and it just sort of makes it a little bit warmer and distorted and sort of crunchy. After that, I just added erosion, which really sort of brings home the whole thing. And I use this noise thing here, which I guess makes it kind of nastier, I guess. And yeah, that's all that is. Now, on top of all this, I have this little vocal loop. And the purpose of that is just to add a bit of melodic content over that. So what I did for that was I took this like vocal sample I found, like an acapella from some free sample pack.
Tell me what's going
So it just goes like
for
that.
you, for you, for
But there was
you,
this part.
for you.
But I didn't
You
take
know
that.
I want.
All I took was the part where she goes, for you. And here, let me take it over here. What I did to it was I pitched it up +3.
For you.
So there's +3. And then at the end of every 2 bars, I added a little variation. Like I pitched this one up +5. And this one is up, I believe, +8. And then all I did to that was I did this little technique where you do like a reverb that's completely wet, but with a very short decay time and a very short size. And then I distorted it a little bit with a bit warmer. So what that does is it sort of, like I was saying with the drums, gives it a bit more like liveliness and puts it more in like a room. And also the distortion sounds pretty good on the tails of those. And yeah, after that I just added a ping pong delay. Just doing quarter notes to sort of, I guess, give it even more space. And then I just sidechain it to the kick. And so vocal chops are pretty important in this style of music, I've noticed. So I just wanted to add that to sort of show you guys how to do it. And yeah, so that's pretty much that. Thank you so much, everybody. If you get a chance, please subscribe, like this video, share it maybe. Download the sample pack for this video, which is free, and also check out my sample packs on my Bandcamp link, which is in the description. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Have a nice day.